Hi, my name's Michael, and welcome to Today Dreamer, a podcast and YouTube channel that examines the interplay between inner work and outer work. Through conscious conversations and practical walkthroughs, we'll be exploring ideas and practices to help you find a deeper sense of clarity, develop your focus, and take meaningful action. I hope you love the show. I feel like there are a lot of parallels to be drawn between traveling and life. After all, life is almost like a journey in itself. And just like traveling, when we open up to different types of experiences and different possibilities, it allows our life to unfold in really beautiful ways that wouldn't have been possible if we were a bit more closed. In this travel-based podcast episode, I'm going to be speaking to Amanda Kendle from the Thoughtful Travel podcast. Amanda and I have been friends for quite a while now, and in this discussion, we kind of dig deep more into my own style of travel, which is slow, long-term travel and traveling solo. So we're going to be diving into kind of the reasons why I feel like you can approach travel as a way to accelerate your own growth. And it does so inevitably when you're opening yourself up to such a, tidal wave of new experiences from every direction that you may not have access to in your regular daily routine. So we're going to be talking about how to really make the most out of your travel and how to really, squeeze the juice out of these experiences and open up and allow possibilities to unfold. I can't wait to share this one with you. I've got an upcoming episode with Rolf Potts, who is a hero of mine and someone that's kind of inspired this big 2-year trip around the world that I recently got back home from. And the chat's only going to be an audio only podcast. So it's only going to be available on iTunes, Spotify, and anywhere else you can find a podcast, but not on YouTube. So that's why I thought I would put this one up. Amanda asked me to be a guest on her podcast, and I thought I'd kind of film it and put it up for you guys to check out as well. And hopefully you can get something out of this. I feel like there's a lot of different ways to center yourself and to get a new perspective on things. And one of the best ways that I really want to encourage and highlight is solo travel. Solo travel for a decent amount of time really allows you to then, come to problems with a different perspective, come and look at your life from a different point of view and really see things that you definitely would have missed ingrained in your regular patterns if you hadn't had gone away and kind of opened yourself up to a new experience. So we're going to be having a chat about this. Let's get into it, and hopefully you get something out of this travel-based podcast episode. Yeah, let's go down that path. I'm just curious on what you've got under the other section of Good for the World, because I've got some ideas in my mind, and I want to see what kind of you've come up with in that domain.
Yes. Okay. I'll tell you a few things. Things like it's really diverse, but things like tourist money being really vital for the world. I just posted in my group yesterday a thing about African wildlife conservation being at huge risk because the tourist dollars aren't there, and it's tourism that props up, animal conservation. So that's like one, and obviously, animal conservation is important. Well, I think we can agree. So that's one kind of example that a lot of industries can collapse without tourism, and some of them are really important industries. But then also the kind of the person to person stuff I think is really important, of people being more tolerant and being more understanding and having connections with people in other places, so that the news and the current affairs and all of the and policies around the world are meaningful to people everywhere, so they don't just see, oh, there's a war in Afghanistan, blah blah blah. Like, people have, oh, I remember when I was there and I met this person and this would be affecting them. And I think that, I have this kind of idea that would bring about world peace if everybody had connections in all around the world. So those kinds of things as well. What else have I been rabbiting on about? There's so many things, but there's some of my ideas about, I think travel is so much bigger than just one person going on a trip. I think it's so connecting, and yes, we have to look at like sustainability issues and stuff, but we can't just say travel is bad, we shouldn't get on a plane again, because there's so many benefits that come with it that we need to, kind of figure out the right level, I suppose, of of how much travel is the right amount.
Yeah, and the way in which we do travel,
Yeah.
and being open to, like, I mean, that's a lot of that's to do with my style, and that's kind of,
Yeah.
I think, from based on our last conversation, yours as well, and just being open to kind of whichever way the road takes you, and whether that's even a road at all, or a plane, or even like a boat, like being open to different possibilities when it comes to travel, taking opportunities as they kind of arise, and saying yes to things that feel right, instead of just kind of pre-packaging and pre-planning your whole trip. That's kind of the way I like to do things, and I feel like um, that has allowed me to invite experiences that have allowed me to grow in ways that I couldn't have foreseen if I've just kind of written everything out, and had a plan. I stuck to it, and didn't kind of deviate. Do you find that with your travel that having a plan in certain areas helps, or it holds you back a little bit?
I think it goes two ways. Like, I think there's a level to which some research in advance is really, really useful because you can find really good ways to do things. Like, really simple example, we were in Copenhagen exactly this time last year. We wanted to hire bikes because we wanted to be, real locals and ride our bikes around the city, and also, sustainable. And rather than just go to the first bike shop we saw, I did a bit of research beforehand, and we found this amazing bike shop, which is also a social enterprise, and they have this great relationship with with an NGO in, I want to say Mozambique. I think Mozambique. Now I'm not sure. Where they send bikes down there and send people to train people to work as bike mechanics. And so, we got our bikes, but we also supported a really interesting social enterprise. And of course, my son was all interested in, where the bikes ended up and what happened, and how that kind of was a really sustainable model. And I wouldn't have found them if I was just walking down the street spontaneously. Where am I going to hire a bike?
Mm,
So I think some research is good, but definitely not the on this day we will do this and on this day we will do that. That is not my kind of travel because
mm.
first of all, you don't know, as simple as are you going to feel like doing that activity on that day? Who knows? And if you pack your schedule with that kind of stuff, then you've got no space for, oh, I was walking down the street and I saw this really interesting looking gallery, or I was at the pub and I started talking to this person and they invited us out to their summer house for the day, or, you've got to have space to invite the experiences, just like you said. So,
Yeah, and I feel like even like there's an interesting concept that I started because I went away on this trip for about, I don't know, like 2.5 years now, just to give your listeners some context. And when I came back, I've been trying to kind of apply some of the same ways of thinking that I've learned on my journey to my regular life, and that
mm.
seems to be something that I keep coming back to, forgetting about while I'm obviously on the road. But then when I come back home, it's always a challenging thing to try to apply. Have you had any experience with that at all?
Oh, that's such a. I'm really curious to hear how you've managed to do that. I try really hard to have that. When I talk about it with my son as having the travel feeling at home, and sometimes that's being curious about our own neighborhood or our own city. Sometimes that's really making an effort to eat new things and go to the Asian grocer in the next suburb and find what they've got there. So we're having our taste buds are having a travel adventure. And sometimes it's okay today. I can be a bit of a workaholic, so it's today I'm not doing any work at all, and we're gonna watch documentaries all day and decide where we're going next, or those lots of different sort of travel feelings that we try and cultivate at home. And I know I do have to kind of be deliberate about doing it, but I always love it once I do it. But
Mm.
you've had that more, longer term. I mean, I did long term travel before, but now, kind of in a routine with a kid and that kind of thing. So I'd be curious to hear from you, what kind of stuff do you bring back from your travels and put into everyday life?
Well, I think sometimes it can feel weird doing things on your own at home. Like if I was to go to the cinemas on my own, like back in the day, I'm sure a few friends would have said to me, that's a strange thing to do. Or even imagine going to a restaurant on your own if you're not used to it, and just kind of having a meal to yourself and enjoying the experience of being in the ambience of even if it is your hometown, and just kind of people watching and observing what the vibe and energy is of the place. That kind of thing I used to never do at home, and now I've started doing that. And like you said, being curious and inquisitive about my surroundings, and looking at kind of life with a new lens. And I feel like trying new things, no matter where you are, whether you're traveling or at home, allows us to really expand our horizons and see things from different vantage points and invite these new experiences into our life. And I think when you're traveling, the beauty of it is you're kind of you're kind of not forced to, but you've got no choice to invite new experiences because everything's a new experience, and it's this explosion of experiences that then the question becomes how are you going to kind of integrate these new experiences and draw lessons from them and kind of start using that in your life. But at home, you can do the same thing. It's all about just choosing a different direction and being open to try something new and keeping that kind of at the fore of your mind rather than
Mm.
just kind of going about your regular routine. And that
Mm.
has some really interesting benefits. I mean, they say that one of the ways to tap into the flow state, or some people call it the zone, which is kind of that feeling you get when you're doing work and all of a sudden it feels like the wind's behind your sails and things are just flowing and working out well. They say that novelty is a great way to kind of slip into that.
Mm.
So doing something new, going to a different coffee shop to work from, or just getting into nature and exploring a little bit can really spark some potential within you for creation and this flow state and new experiences to come through. And I mean, I feel that's one of the biggest things from travel, and bringing that home is a really kind of powerful thing. Mm.
That's so true. I mean, I know when I'm traveling, I have, really huge bursts of creativity, and it's so right. You're absolutely right when you explain that the novelty of what you're doing that kind of inspires that. But you can absolutely do that at home. You just have to be more deliberate about it because generally at home everything is not novel. But you can make it that way for sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
the other thing that was interesting about what we said before was, about the idea of going to the cinema or the restaurant on your own. And I think that's the beauty of when you're traveling. If you're traveling solo, for example, you're anonymous. No one knows you. You'll probably never see them again. So you do a lot of things on your own that you wouldn't think twice about when you're traveling. Whereas when you're at home, then you might think, oh, someone might see me and see them on my own, and they might say something or that kind of thing. Whereas
Yeah,
I have a
and
big habit of taking myself out. So because I work for myself, I have a very strong policy of one day a month I have to have a proper day off, on a work day, on a weekday, and that day off involves exactly taking myself to the cinema in the morning. They're normally empty at 10 o'clock. It's fabulous. And going out for lunch to somewhere I haven't been before on my own. And that day, I do it usually once a month, sometimes a bit less, but it's so inspiring for me. I always end up, I don't intend to work on those days, but I end up, inevitably at my lunch, taking notes and scribbling new ideas I've had. And it's because I've had to, I've forced myself to stop doing all the normal things and do something novel and be by myself, I think.
yeah, and so many there's so many ideas that are allowed to flow once you get into that state. And I used to work in creativity and advertising, and the way that we found a way to come up with new ideas that works almost every time, and that's to fill kind of your subconscious mind with all this kind of raw material. So you do a bunch of research, you study up on whatever the subject is that you're trying to produce a new idea on, and then you need to actually step away from that and do like something totally different and unrelated to allow that to kind of marinate within your mind, and then out of nowhere, seemingly out of nowhere, the ideas come. But really, it can be an intentional thing to create these ideas, or allow the space for them to kind of pop up. If you do some work and then in some way or another step away from that and go spend that day at the movies, or having lunch with yourself and exploring a little bit. So it's really interesting when we're thinking about travel as a way to get inspired, to have new ideas. And so many times I hear stories about people going away for a while, like quite a while, and coming back and starting a business and kind of, going down a path that's possibly much more meaningful than the one that they were previously on.
Yeah, and I think that's no coincidence that that happens to people so often. Yeah, it's definitely the experiences of travel that really kickstart that inspiration, and the being away from the routine, that you realize you can break the routine, that life can be different, and then it gives you that space to have the new ideas, and you're ready to come back and start something fresh. Yeah, I've seen that happen so many times as well.
Yeah, yeah, but it is. I mean, I don't think that would be the only reason you'd go on a long term journey. Just coming back to, I guess, my style of travel, I feel as though there's a lot of there was for me anyways a lot of fear and a lot of kind of feelings of not being so sure and not really knowing, if what I was doing was the right thing. Even though deep within I had this knowing that it was kind of overcoming those insecurities and kind of taking the leap. That stage kind of needs to be met as well, and I feel like if you're just going to get inspired, I, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I feel like there's so much more you'll get out of long term travel, and I feel like um, coming back from a long term trip, you're transformed in a way that's a lot more accelerated if you were to stay at home because of all these new experiences, because of everything we've been talking about, and that's a beautiful feeling, to come back. Quite a while after you've left. I mean, any trip you transform, you come back and you look at um, you kind of slip into your old shoes, but everything else is different, and it's quite an interesting feeling, but a really rewarding one as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Yeah. Travel just can be so transformative. It's very true. You touched on there, on having lots of, on having fears and concerns before and I guess during travel. Can you tell me a bit more about the kind of fears and how you get over them?
Sure, yeah. So some fears, I mean, money's the first one that comes to mind, and it's something that I think a lot of people have fears about whether they're traveling or not, and I feel like it's just kind of the way the system's set up, with the competitiveness and that scarcity and lack mentality. But I feel like when you travel somewhere, like we said before, it's important to plan, but it's also important to kind of go with the flow of things. And most of the time, if you're traveling long term, it's going to be a lot cheaper than you think. And when you're traveling to certain places, you could live cheaper on the road than you can kind of in any kind of Western city. And you'll be really surprised how far money can go, especially if you're willing to kind of sacrifice some of the luxuries. And depending on how you travel, and I'm sure you've got, a range of different listeners and different people like to travel in different ways. I feel like every kind of struggle has a little bit of a reward to it, just as every kind of pleasure has a cost. So, if you're willing to give up on some things, you'll get into much more kind of profound experiences. Well, at least that's been kind of what's happened to me. So I think money's a big one, and if you're going for a long term trip. There's a lot of uncertainty, especially if you don't have a date that you're coming back, and usually that date changes if you have one anyway. So overcoming that uncertainty is, something I guess we all need to do in different areas of our lives anyways, even though it might not seem that way. Like look at this whole COVID situation, for example. We don't know what's happening, in the future, but that's like learning to be okay with that and learning to kind of go with things no matter what, and adapt to change is an important thing in life. So the fear of money, the anxiety of not knowing, the uncertainty of where things are going, where I'll end up, what I'm going to be doing when I'm coming back, and then also packing your stuff. Like, how do I bring the right amount of things where I'm not lugging around the world, but at the same, so I'm kind of mobile and flexible, but at the same time, I'm taking what I need for an indefinite trip. So that's a big one that comes into the equation. What else? Friends, and am I going to be scared to be lonely is a big one. And I've found that solitude can be a really rewarding thing. And so solitude is when you learn to be with yourself, and loneliness is when you crave the company of others. So learning to be with yourself can also help you develop and grow in a lot of different areas. And even getting lonely at times, and finding a way around that and getting through that. And the truth is, there's so many other travelers out there. You're never really alone. There's always going to be, someone to strike up a conversation with, or new friends to meet. And the possibilities are endless when it comes to travel, and the types of people that you'll meet and the stories that you'll have together and the adventures you'll go on. So just, again, that comes into the uncertainty frame as well, I guess. I'm trying to think what else was I scared of before I left. There's so much, but I think the acknowledgement of the fear as a signal that you're moving in the right direction is the key. So if you're not scared, you're probably a little bit too comfortable, which means that you're limiting your own potential for growth. So the fear is actually a strong signal that you may actually be doing the right thing.
100% agree. Yeah. And I always think it's so interesting. I talk to people who have really deep seated fears or anxieties about various aspects of travel, and yet they do it anyway. And I think that's exactly the reason, because they know that, yes, they feel that way, but the rewards are so much better than that feeling or that fear. So, I mean, I know. A good big handful of travel writers who travel, probably at least half the year or more, who have really bad anxiety about things like flying, and uh, doesn't stop them. So they might hate those trips, passionately be terrified, but they know that the consequence of doing it is they get to be in a new place, they get to experience new things, that it's so worth it that they will overcome that fear somehow so that they can do it. So I think travel's really amazing like that. It's something that really pulls people to get past their fears in a way that not many other things do.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I feel like the fear is almost worse than the actual whatever you're scared of itself. That's kind of like, right, a cliche, but it's so
But
true.
true.
Yeah, and it's a cliche for a reason. Exactly. So like, I guess another one. I just thought of one more, and this is probably a big one. It's the fear of going somewhere that you hear is dangerous,
Mm.
or that you're worried about getting robbed or stabbed or shot or whatever. And I feel as though that kind of fear um, is again another signal to be extra careful and to do things in a way that's, I guess, smart. But it shouldn't stop you going there and experiencing the culture and the place and the people and you know the sights, the smells, and the rest of it. It should only be a signal, I believe. Like, because if you really want to go somewhere, you shouldn't let what other people's opinions or other people have. Everyone has their own individual experience, and a lot of time these fears come from stories, which you should again pay attention to. But I find like if you like, I was really worried on my trip because I do a lot of filming, and I was worried that wherever I'm going to go, my stuff's going to get stolen, and I'm going to get beaten up because I'm carrying around a camera, and I'm going to kind of get into a lot of trouble. But I found that if I speak to you can really limit the chances of that happening if you speak to locals when you're there. You kind of speak to hostels and find out, where to go, where not to go. Even if you're not staying in a hostel, you can still do that, and just kind of read up online through like forums and blogs and things like that about the things to be careful of. You can usually kind of avoid any sticky situations, and even if you do get into them, if you've got insurance, it kind of helps you out.
Yeah, exactly. I think, yeah, we're often fearful of things that have a very, very, very tiny chance of happening. And even if they happen nearly all the time, things turn out okay and you end up with a great story to tell. The chances of something actually going badly wrong are very, very, very slim. And I always think often, pretty much the same as of something going wrong while you're back home. So, yeah, I think, but, it's still hard. It's easy to stay in our comfort zone at home and much harder to step out of it. I was just wondering, can you think of a perhaps a specific example of a destination you were particularly worried about, or had some special that you maybe were concerned was dangerous?
Yeah, there's a place actually someone emailed me about recently, and it's called Cali, and it's in Colombia, and it's where it's kind of like the birthplace of salsa. So even though salsa didn't come from there, they've got actually their own version, the Colombian salsa, I guess, from Cali, and it's the way they dance, and it's just the whole place. The taxi drivers are playing it in the cars, and there's people dancing on the street. There's salsa techs every night, and there's studios to dance and learn to dance in everywhere. So it's really in the life and the blood of the place, and I really wanted to go there for that reason, but I heard that it was very sketchy, and there's so many stories about people getting robbed and running away from people that had pulled guns on them and all that kind of thing. But I went anyways, and I kind of made sure I was in a group while I was there, and it was probably one of my most rewarding experiences. I was doing salsa classes during the day, and then every night I would go out and practice the moves I'd learnt the previous day, and I did that for about 4 weeks, and I got like really good at dancing. And I paid for the classes with video work. So I created videos for the studio so I didn't have to pay for them. And it was just like an amazing experience. A lot of friends, a lot of dancing, and kind of a crazy time. So, and if I hadn't have gone, if I hadn't have pushed past that, I wouldn't have realized it, but I definitely would have lost something, you know?
Absolutely. That's a perfect example. That's excellent. I was speaking with a travel writer earlier this week. I don't know what day. Um, and so she does lots of mountain bike trips around the world, and writes about them for lots of papers and stuff. And she had this really interesting framework that she'd kind of developed. I was going to flick back and find what she called it. I can't remember. But she basically had, she called it her pie chart of reality. And she said that relatively, a few years back, she went on a mountain bike trek in Afghanistan. And so she used this kind of framework where she thinks that like 95% of the info that you see about a place is kind of just headlines and not very necessarily based in actual truth. And then like 4% of your info, maybe is from people who've actually been there, so it's a bit more true. And then like 0.5% or something is like actual, real statistics and real facts about what it's really like on the ground in a place like that. And she says that, and that's those kind of proportions are the way people think about it when they're deciding should we travel there or not. And she said her thing is you should flip that all completely around, and that 0.5% of the real information, that's the stuff you really have to pay attention to, and the other stuff is just little warnings, and you could see if you need to find out anything more about it. But that's sort of her method that she uses to combat like the fear of danger and that kind of thing, because that way she can get a much more accurate picture, and it served her very well. She's been to all kinds of crazy places that people said she shouldn't go, and off she went. She's never had any problems and had some amazing experiences. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting in life how risk is kind of linked to reward in a way. So sometimes even taking a little bit of a risk will leave you with a much better or deeper experience.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's an interesting pie chart. I feel like that's totally true and really accurate.
Yeah. It fascinated me. I think I'll put that together with this discussion in an episode, and it should be. There, so you go. I knew we'd create a whole topic like this, so perfect.
Nice, you're all over it.
Yeah. Yeah. She was fascinating to talk to. What do I want to ask you about? Could you perhaps give us an overview of how you approach a long-term trip, like when you were. I mean, I know kind of what you did, but describe, how you stay a long time in each place, and
Yeah.
how do you decide where to go next? Kind of that, that longer term travel style. Can you maybe describe your kind of principles and some examples of what you did?
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, pre-trip, if we're talking to begin with, I think it's important to plan, and then you can only plan so much, and then you just got to go for it and pull the trigger. So get excited about where you want to go, and kind of set a date is important in the beginning, and um, kind of jot down some places. This is what I did, anyways. I jotted down some places. I got a map, like I can see a beautiful map in the background there. I got a map and I put some kind of pins on it, and I said, I want to go here, I want to go there, I want to go here, I want to go there, and that was kind of like, I guess, a really loose structure of places that would excite me, I guess, the most. And it doesn't really matter the reason so much why you go to a place. Like I was talking to someone, not sure if you've heard of Rolf Potts. He wrote a book called
Mm-hmm.
Vagabonding. Yeah,
Yep.
so that
Yep.
was one of the inspirations for my trip. And he actually mentions, really crazy ways that people come up with ideas of the reasons why they want to get to places. And that's not so much what matters. It's really being open to the experience when you're there. So coming up with a plan, having a loose kind of structure, looking at kind of different types of places. Like I was in a bit of a budget, so I wanted to do the trip for as long as possible for as little money as possible. So South America was the place I chose, and I found really cheap tickets to Hawaii. So I jumped on a plane there to begin with, and I linked it up from there. And once I was kind of on the road, I had, like I said, I'd kind of I'd organized my packing list, what I'd have in my bag. I'd gone through about 3 or 4 different backpacks and sent them all back because I wasn't really happy with the one I ended up with. I ended up getting a Black Wolf 50-liter backpack with a little day pack. And then, organizing what you're going to take on your trip, what you're going to need. Most of the time, you don't need half as much as you think you do. So kind of practicing the packing and practicing what I'm going to take was all kind of part of the preparation. And then I went off on the journey, and after that point, I was kind of really just leaving it up to whatever kind of unfolded in front of me. So I was going from place to place and seeing, where the next destination was. I ended up like doing trading, like I said, video work for different experiences, and that was one of the most, I didn't plan to do that, but it ended up really working out in my favor. I got to go to the Amazon, deep into the Amazon at like a 5-star resort for free. I got to
Oh,
sail around
awesome.
the Galapagos, and I got to do things like these dancing classes, which were really amazing experiences. I ended up trading some of my. I ended up working on a site called Workaway. I'm not sure if you've heard about it. It's
Mm-hmm.
pretty much you can work for someone, and they can provide you with food, board, or both. Sometimes some money as well. So I did that in Canada with a guy
Mm.
doing wildlife tours on a boat for 4 months. So that was really cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So we did that. Um, and this, I'm just trying to think of other ways that you can kind of get by. I think not to plan too far ahead when it's a long-term trip, because you might hear about an awesome place or a cool story, and then you choose to go off in that direction, but it might not really link up with your plans if you're too stringent with things. So
Mm-hmm.
I think leaving a space for kind of spontaneity is important. Um, I'm trying to think what else I did that really kind of strung the pieces together. I ended up um, meeting my partner overseas as well, so we did some travel together. So it turned from kind of a solo trip to a duo trip, which was fun, and allowed kind of her suggestions to come into play, and followed kind of her a little bit on things as well.
Hmm.
But
Nice.
yeah, so that combined with obviously, like you said, research and knowing what I was getting into. I guess before I went to a place, I would spend a day or two and really just research it like really well. Um, and just after that point, just dive into it, and see what happens. I think a lot of it's letting go, and getting
Mm.
to a point that you can let go. And I don't think you can do that right away. I think it takes sometimes even a couple of weeks to get into that state. But then once you're there, things come naturally, and you just go with it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it takes time, especially these days when we're really connected and the research is at our fingertips. So when I was traveling in the early 2000s, if you wanted the internet, you had to go to an internet cafe, and otherwise we would just be left with a physical guidebook and not much else. And I actually really miss those days because then it was much simpler. We didn't have so many options, and so
Mm.
we would just land somewhere and think, okay, where will we stay? Look around, we'll find somewhere to stay. Where are we going to go, next, and how long will we stay here? And I love having that open-ended nature of things and not booking ahead ever, because then nobody did, because it was just much too tricky to do so. So you would just rock up places, and if that hostel or somewhere was full, then they would tell you somewhere else to go, and it would be fine. And I feel like these days it's harder to do that. But I think you're right that if you're traveling long term, you want to be as spontaneous as you can,
Mm.
within reason. But it does take a while to, I imagine, these days too, to really sink into that. Um, like it's kind of almost relinquishing control in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's kind of the opposite of what we're used to doing in our day-to-day lives. I feel like going to nature is a trick that you can apply to really accelerate that process. So you go deep
Mm.
into nature anywhere in the world, and if you do it somewhere that you're not used to, you're experiencing different flora, fauna, different animals, and a different vibe, a different environment. And once you're kind of immersed in nature, I feel like that automatically allows you to wash away that sense of kind of, you know, ongoing distraction that we're always a part of, and really reconnect with, a deeper primal self. And then, a lot of that kind of stuff kind of just washes away a bit, I think a bit more quickly than if you're just kind of traveling around to cities.
Mm. Oh, I agree. I agree. I think, yeah, nature is really powerful, and to be out in it is, yeah, definitely accelerates that feeling of letting go of the rest of stuff in life. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And
yeah.
I think probably the most rewarding experience I had on my whole trip was when I was in nature for a long period of time without technology at all. Like they didn't even have
Mm.
internet access, and we were just kind of, we're in the jungles of Costa Rica, and it was really just a process of, reconnecting with the environment, and with planet Earth. And it was just this beautiful kind of experience. And I feel like that I could easily say that was kind of, the richest, most profound experience on my whole journey. It's interesting when you look back on the moments, and they're all different and unique and special in their own ways. And people always ask, what was the most rewarding experience? And I've never been able to give an answer, but I feel like that time on this particular trip was definitely it.
Mm. It's I mean, I'm it's hard for me to let go of technology, especially if I'm traveling without my son. I feel like I
Mm,
need to be able to be in contact. He's only 10 now, and if I'm traveling without him, I want somebody to be able to contact me if there's something with him.
mm.
But it's a real downside because if you can let go of that technology, or if it's taken away from you because there's no there's no signals or whatever, then that's such a special time because I mean, it's awful how much time we spend connected. There's lots of pros to it, but there's so many cons, and it's really hard to get that, and that real disconnect and back to just you and just people in front of you and stuff. So I think, yeah, I can see why that would have been a really special time.
Yeah, I mean, you could always take your son with you into nature,
Oh,
and
he
I'm
usually
sure you
comes with
have.
me, but sometimes he has to
y-
stay at school, or
Yeah,
or
of
taken,
course.
and I'm not, he's not invited like on sponsors trips and stuff. He's not always invited. So although more and more I get to take him with me, but there are times when he's not with me, and there'll probably be more times like that in the near future as he's in high school and stuff. So
And
yeah,
how is he when you return from a trip? How's that?
when he's been left behind.
When you leave him behind, but then you come back and reunite, what
Oh,
do you
it's the
guys get up
best.
to?
Oh, it's the best moments. I get the best cuddles for weeks.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's probably only once or twice a year I leave him, and it's usually when I go to a conference, but there's usually some travel attached to the conference. So, he hates it when I leave him because he thinks he's missing out, and well, he's right. He is missing out. But yeah, when I get to return and see him, then that's just very extra special time because he's always missed me and he wants to know everything I've been doing. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're very special moments when you reunite with a loved one. Whether it's I really like them during a trip as well. Like imagine he was to fly out and meet you somewhere overseas. There's something really nice about that. But even coming back and spending time with loved ones again, there's something so beautiful about that. And really I believe those moments which, you do have while you travel as well, but those moments I've come to learn that those are kind of the most important things in life, those moments of connection with the ones that we love. And there's something about traveling that really accentuates them.
It's really, really true. Absolutely. I mean, I love coming home to him, but I do love more to take him with me because we have awesome time when we travel together, and everything else is gone then. There's no school and there's no work and there's no other things going on. So it's just him and me, and off we go and see the world. And yeah, that's really special.
I think
You
he's
know,
lucky
really
to have
special.
a mum like you that especially, not only that you're a beautiful person, Amanda, but also because you go traveling so often and that's on some level, allowing him to have all these, explosion of new experiences as he's growing up, which will then, I'm sure make a huge difference in the person that he grows into.
Oh, I'm sure it has really shaped his personality because since he was a baby, he's always come traveling a lot with me, and I think he would be very different if he hadn't had those experiences. So, um, and to some extent, he's quite spoiled, but at the same time, I mean, we live here in a small house with an old car because he knows I would rather spend money on flights than on material things. And yeah, he's had the chance to come with me to, on a really vast variety of kinds of trips and to kinds of destinations, which absolutely have shaped a lot of the way he sees the world. He's really empathetic and really open minded, and he puts his friends in their place if they say something that he, thinks isn't right. And yeah, so no, it's definitely shaped his personality. I can see for sure.
Yeah, he sounds like a really good kid. I'm
He is a good kid.
I'm just thinking because you mentioned something interesting there. You said I live in a small house and I've got kind of like an old car, and I think that kind of brings a lot into question. Is kind of what are people willing to give up for these kinds of experiences, and you know, like kind of absorbing and really feeling the value of these kinds of experiences, and putting things into real perspective, and kind of taking another second to really think about things and what's meaningful to you in your life and what you value, can really overcome a lot of these fears that we were talking about earlier. Mm.
It's absolutely true. And over the years, lots of people have said to me, "Oh, you're so lucky you get to go on that trip or whatever." And I'm like, "Well, I'm
Mm,
not lucky. I've planned it that way, and you have your fancy new car, but I have my trip, and it's just a matter of priorities." And I think a lot of people, I mean, maybe they do get a lot of pleasure out of their fancy new car,
mm,
perhaps. I
mm,
don't know. I wouldn't, but maybe they do, or maybe they're too scared to pick the alternative. I don't know.
mm, mm. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I think a lot of things come into that equation. I also believe that everyone's like, an individual, and kind of is on their own path and their own process to kind of, um, you know, moving through this life in whichever way they choose to. So, like, obviously, it's not up to us to judge anyone, but at the same time, what works for us, I think it's important to be honest with yourself. And if you've got a
Yeah.
calling to go traveling, and if you
Yeah.
feel like that's important to you, and then you'd be really letting yourself down if you weren't to do it. And if you're saving it for later, I mean,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
kind of what
That's
I'm all about.
risky.
Don't do that, because,
Don't
like,
do that.
we're in the now. We're living today, and even if you can't afford to leave right now, even if you can't kind of you know you can't make the arrangements for it to happen tomorrow, you can still start planning. You can still set a date, and you can still move towards that.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this coronavirus time has kind of highlighted that, because I think a lot of people think, oh yes, I really want to go on that trip. I'll do that someday, or I'll do that,
Mm,
next year or next year or next year. And then I think we always think we can do it any time, but suddenly this year we can't, and it's beyond our control that we can no longer travel at the
mm,
moment.
mm,
And I think I feel really at peace with the fact that I've traveled a lot, and I mean, there's still a million places and a million kinds of experiences I want to have, but I feel like I have, to the best of my ability, created those experiences for myself wherever possible.
mm.
Without, I still have a roof over my head. I haven't, I haven't gone into debt to travel or anything, but in a sensible way, I have said yes to as many opportunities as I can. So I don't have any regrets. I feel really sad that this year we won't be in Germany when we should be, and things like that. But I don't feel much regret. But I've seen lots of people kind of thinking, wow, I had this trip, I've been planning it for years and years, and now suddenly this year I can't do it. Maybe I should have done it sooner, and things like that. So I think maybe people are starting to think maybe it'll have that effect, that they'll kind of seize the day a bit more when we can travel again.
Yeah, I mean, everything that's happened with COVID is more than anything an opportunity to really re-examine the way that we've been living our lives, and to really take note of things that may not have been serving us, and realizations that we may want to move ahead, and kind of grow through this change, and take this opportunity to really do something about it, and do things a little bit differently when it's all kind of past, or if it ever passes.
I know. Well, it might never be quite the same again,
Yeah.
but
Well,
yes,
nothing ever
certainly.
is.
No, absolutely. But certainly at some stage again, our borders will be open, and there'll be some kinds of opportunities to travel. So,
Mm,
yeah, which I'm sure you and
mm.
I both look forward to.
Definitely, yeah. I feel like more than anything, I miss nature. Like, I'm actually thinking about taking my little one and going into nature tomorrow, because we've been on lockdown. We haven't been able to leave our houses, see our loved ones, or even get into nature. So I feel like something's missing there, and I really want to get back into it. Before the trip though, I was actually before, sorry, COVID all kicked in. I was actually in Tasmania, and I was doing a little trip over there. First
Beautiful.
time, and it's such an amazing place. And it's one of those places that everyone says it's amazing, and you're kind of like, yeah, I'll do it later. And I decided I'll just go there, and I have to recommend Tasmania to everyone. Like, that
I
place
love
is just,
Tasmania. I've
it
been
just
three
feels so
times,
so
and
beautiful.
every trip, so after three trips, I still want to go back there. And
Mm,
every time I'm there, I think, oh, I could live here. It's amazing.
mm, mm.
Yeah, I think Tassie's a really special place too. Yeah.
There's
But
so much untouched that's there, and there's so much to do for such a small, or seemingly small, kind of
yeah,
place, right? It's
yeah,
incredible.
absolutely. Yeah, which is so different to the rest of Australia, where distances are so vast. And in Tasmania, you just, yeah, it's kind of, I always think of it as the like European Australia, where, there's something new around every corner.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's
I
something I
love it.
find really fascinating about Tasmania, and also about New Zealand, is that they're in size in comparison to a lot of different countries. They're quite small places, but even in New Zealand, there's been like canyons over the last couple of years that have been kind of discovered for the first time, or for a very long time, a very long time, kind of, and different areas of the place that seem, even though they may not be totally, like, pretty untouched, And I really like that about
Mm.
New Zealand and Tasmania in particular. And they have a similar kind of, I guess, climate and feeling to them as well. Did you notice that?
So I've still, to my shame, never been to New Zealand, but maybe 8 or 9 years ago with my then husband, I said to him, I'm going to take you to Tasmania first because I think you have to go to Tasmania before you can go to New Zealand. We never got to New Zealand, but I feel that their similarities are quite strong. And I think that New Zealand is kind of Tasmania on steroids. So you should go to Tassie first. That's how I've kind of perceived them over the years.
Yeah, I guess you could dip your foot into Tassie before you go to New Zealand. And I think New Zealand's quite expensive. So I think Tassie would be a little bit cheaper. But then again, like we don't want to fall into that trap of saying this place is pretty expensive and this place isn't, because that's another thing that you don't really know till you get there. You can always do things on the cheap if that's the
Yeah,
way you
there's
want to
always
do
different
things.
ways. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the stupid trap from Perth is that New Zealand feels very far away because there's virtually no direct, usually no direct flights and stuff. And so it takes you much longer and much more expense to get there than to go to, Malaysia or Thailand or, those kind of places which seem more different. So that's kind of the trap from Perth is we tend to go into Asia instead of going east instead. But yeah, but perhaps a COVID pro will be that there'll be a travel bubble where we won't be able to go to Asia, but we might be able to go to New Zealand, and that might be the time I finally get there. So
Well, that's
we'll
what I
see.
wanted to ask you about because of everything that's happened with COVID. Like I've got one particular kind of travel episode all about kind of solo travel and long-term travel with Rolf Potts up my sleeve, but I haven't been releasing it because I'm like, no one's traveling at the moment. Are people really going to want to kind of hear about traveling right now? And a friend of mine said, of course they are. Like people are probably want to hear about it more now because they kind of want to live vicariously through these
Your friend's
stories and
right.
adventures.
My downloads are at record levels. So I think as long as
Really?
you're not very destination specific, I think my friends with very destination specific podcasts, they're not doing so well,
Mm.
but more just inspirational and thinking about travel and talking about more general things about travel. Yeah, my downloads have never been higher. So
That's good to
yeah,
know.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So release it. I want to listen to that one.
Yeah, it's a good one. Like I said, like
Yeah.
this guy's been like a hero of mine and kind of was a bit of an inspiration for my trip. And he
Yeah.
really
I've followed
knows,
him for years. He's awesome.
yeah, he knows
Did
what
you
he's
just
talking
approach him
about.
out of the blue or did you have a contact?
No, I just out of the blue. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Do it. I reckon
I
he'd be
will, I will.
awesome for the show. Yeah.
Yeah, he'd be great.
And
Yeah.
say hi from me if you
Oh, I will.
get a
Thank you.
chance. Yeah.
I have to wrap it up, I'm afraid, because I have to go and pick up said 10-year-old from school.
Yeah.
So, but
That's cool.
this was an awesome chat, and I've already got 2 spots where I know you're going into episodes that will be just perfect. So, thank
Perfect.
you.
No
It's
worries.
been awesome.
I'm happy we got a chance to chat again. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast and the Today Dreamer Podcast. I guess it's a little bit of both. Again, I'm going to be having Rolf Potts on the show on the audio only version of the podcast. So if you're interested, check it out on iTunes, Spotify, anywhere that you get your podcasts. And I really hope that you're getting something out of this content. And I really do hope that this is helping you and that you can potentially apply some of these things on your next travel experience, and that can allow you to kind of open up the doors to new possibilities that you may not have gone down without this kind of these insights from our experience. So thank you so much, and keep tuning in, keep engaging with this stuff if it's helping you out, and feel free to subscribe and let me know what you think. I'm always open to feedback, and I'm trying to make this kind of an interactive, collaborative thing where I can provide as much value as possible. So thank you again, and I'll catch you in the next episode.